Without further ado, Governor Mark Sanford, he is the chairman of the GOP Governors Association. He is, what we believe around here at least, the probable presidential candidate next time around. We're not here to talk about that, though. Governor, how could you be against the fiscal stimulus? Would you turn down federal money to build, bridges and roads in South Carolina?
Well, we'll cross that bridge if and when we get to it. I think what we're doing right now, though, as an administration, is pushing as hard as we possibly can against it, because I think it's a real mistake. I think in the end, it'll lead to less in the way of economic stimulus rather than more. And I think there are a whole host of unintended consequences that will come with this string of bailouts that we're looking, among them being who pays the final bill, and the issue of fairness. You got a lot of smaller businesses or individuals that are struggling. They don't have that big lobbyist in Washington, D.C. or enough voice, but why should they be treated completely differently than some Wall Street firm or three big auto companies in Detroit?
So you are against, now the news is breaking, this $15 billion quote-unquote loan for the big three that will be consummated, we are told, by the beginning of this week.
Yeah, I think it's fundamentally flawed because it's dubbed as a loan, but the reality is American taxpayers will take a distant position with regard to ever collecting on that loan. Not until bankruptcy do you actually wipe out the existing creditors. So the quote loan that American taxpayers are going to forward to those three companies is going to be subordinated to a whole bunch of other creditors that are lined up before. So it'll at the end of the day never prove to be a loan, I don't believe. It'll be another bailout. Another
bailout and costing future generations money. But don't you think that the alternative to the huge deficit, a recession that becomes a depression, is just too grim to bear, Governor Sanford?
Yeah, but the presumption there is that, only checks out of Washington, D.C., only a long series of bailouts. And let me remind you, what we're talking about is not a giant piggyback in Washington, D.C. with money in the bank. We're talking about going and borrowing more money. We borrowed $500 billion from the Chinese, borrowing more from Social Security or Medicare or our kids or our grandkids. And there's something weird about going out and borrowing a bunch of money to take care of a problem that was created by too much borrowing. But leaving that as aside, I think that the real issue here is that, checks out of Washington, D.C. is not the only way that you bring about economic stimulus to this country. And I think we've got to look a lot wider when we think about the notion of economic stimulus. You've got to look at the value of the dollar. You've got to look at trade. You've got to look at, indeed, sustainability of spending. You've got to look at something like this card check program that's being talked about that'll maybe pass in the next legislative cycle. So I think that economic stimulus is much, much broader than simply borrowing money to write checks out of Washington, D.C.
An increasingly minority voice, but an eloquent one, Governor Mark Sanford of South Carolina. Thank you for being with me. Next time we'll all sing with the choir. Thanks a lot.